Introduce yourself to us.
My name is Glenn Garvin.
Hey, Mr. Garvin, I'm standing over here because, unlike a police officer, I'm assuming you've never testified before.
In a courtroom, yes, I have.
Are you a professional witness? Have you been trained on how to testify?
No.
Okay. So, I want you to try to focus your answers directly to the jurors.
Okay.
That's why I'm standing over here trying to get you to do that, force you to do that. Okay? Who do you work for?
The Miami Herald.
Okay, how long have you worked for the Miami Herald?
Since 1992.
Okay. And what's your job description at the Miami Herald?
Well, these days in newspapers, everybody does a little bit of everything. So I'm a TV critic, I write a column for the op-ed page, and I also work as a reporter at times.
Okay. January 31st, 2012, what were you doing?
I believe that's the day I went to cover the eviction of the Occupy Miami demonstrators.
Okay. And when you went to cover the Occupy Miami event, were you aware of any special protocol that you had to follow in terms of who you were supposed to report to at the event, in terms of law enforcement, in order for you to be able to gain access to be able to report upon the event?
No.
Right. So you just went there as a reporter to report news?
Correct.
And that's what you did?
Correct.
Did you check in with anybody?
No.
Okay. And tell me how the day went. What did you do there?
I got there maybe an hour before the scheduled eviction to try and talk to some of the demonstrators and get a sense of were they going to resist arrest, or were they going to resist being evicted or go peacefully. What would happen?
Did you actually speak to some of the protesters?
Oh, yes, many.
Did you ever speak to a gentleman by the name of Malik Muhammad, or something like that, or Muhammad somebody or other? I forget his name.
I certainly had spoken to him on previous trips to that site, and I believe that I spoke to him that day as well.
Okay, so you spoke to, is he the one that's considered the leader organizer of this event?
It's kind of an amorphous group of people, but he's certainly one of the leaders. He's one of the guys who knows what's going on. You talk to him to find out what's up.
Okay, when you were talking to him, did you get any directions, or did you take any directions or orders from him, or anything like that?
No.
So your purpose of talking to him was to gather information?
Correct.
Okay. So tell me how you planned the day. Did you have a plan or a protocol that you were going to follow that day, or just kind of went where the news was?
No, I talked to people to get a sense of, the most important thing, it seemed to me, was what did the demonstrators plan? Were they going to make a fight, as had happened in some other cities, or were they just going to pick up and leave? So I talked to them, got an idea of what was up. When the police arrived in force and said everybody should get out of that area, there was a police officer on a loudspeaker establishing that it was an illegal assembly or something like that. At that time, I moved out of the disputed area and back onto a public street. And from there, I was just sort of following where the action took us.
How were you dressed that day?
I don't remember specifically, but I certainly was not in a suit or tie. I wasn't wearing a jacket like this. I looked like an ordinary person. It's also.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's also possible, I have to say, my beard is not always necessarily as trimmed as it is right now. I may have looked moderately like an Occupy person myself, though I wasn't.
Okay. Do you have? Is there like written? Is it written somewhere that you have to dress a particular way when you go report to the news?
Not unless you're in a courtroom or something like that. No.
Okay. Did Nancy, were you who Nancy Perez is? Do you know now who Nancy is?
I do now, yes.
Did she ever approach you at any point, and I'm not talking about post-Carlos Miller arrest, I'm talking about pre-Carlos Miller arrest, did she ever approach you and say, stick with me?
No.
Did she ever tell you, look, the media can only be where I tell you guys you can be?
Objection, hearsay.
Judge, it specifically goes to our theory of defense. and impeachment of Mrs. Perez.
Self-serving hearsay.
Judge, Mrs. Perez specifically answered this question, and I'm just asking Mr. Garvin if he...
All right, objection sustained, move on.
Was there like a designated media area where the media was all supposed to clump together and report to?
Not in a general sense. This was, once the police moved in to clear the demonstrators out, the situation became very fluid. There were times when police officers who I took to be public affairs officers would say, that's a bad place to be standing, you're liable to get caught between the police and the demonstrators, you'd be wise to not stand there. But that wasn't like a permanent designation because the demonstration would move on. So there were at moments sort of, I would call it more like advice, you know, you're in a bad place, get out of there.
Were you ever specifically told to walk behind the police line or in front of the police line or together with other media, anything like that?
Objection hearsay.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at instructions
I'm
again.
asking if he was told that he was given specific orders, because in this case it's alleged that the media was told to stick with Mrs. Perez and that she identified members of the media. So I'm challenging that through this witness.
But this is a kind of cross-examination technique, using another witness to challenge. Oh,
Okay.
go ahead.
Were you ever specifically told where to stand in relation to the public information officers?
No. There was this sort of indirect suggestion from time to time, but no, there was no general designated media area that I was aware of, that anybody told me about.
Did the media stick together, or were they everywhere? Or different areas?
Different areas. I would say, in a situation like that, journalists tend to clump together a little bit, thinking there's some safety in numbers. But there were lots of different clumps. We weren't all in one place.
So it was hard to tell who was journalist and who was protester at times?
I would say that's true, yes.
Do you ever see Carlos Miller that night?
Yes, I did.
Okay, how did he look?
He, well, the most noticeable thing to him about him, to me at least, was that though I didn't know him, I assumed he was a news photographer. He had a lot of cameras, big expensive cameras, not those sort of tourist snapshotty things.
Can you identify the difference between a touristy snapshotty thing and a really expensive camera?
What I would call a tourist type camera is the little thing you can hold in one hand. What he had were cameras with big lenses. The cameras were bigger. They were strapped to him. I believe he had a camera bag as well. He looked to me not like a guy who just happened to be there, but as a news photographer.
Did you see him at various points throughout the night?
Yes, I believe I did.
Did you ever see him being violent, aggressive towards the police?
No.
Did you ever see the police or hear the police give him a directive or a specific order and that he didn't obey or listen to?
I did not.
Let's talk about the arrest. You saw Mr. Miller being arrested, or you did not?
I did not, though we were relatively close by, certainly no more than 50 feet. At that precise moment, it was late. Deadlines were approaching. It seemed to me most of the action in the demonstration was over. So I had stopped to call my editor on my cell phone to ask him, you want me to stay out here longer, or you want me to go back to the office? It was noisy, cell phone reception, excuse me, wasn't the greatest. And I was concentrating on the phone call, and I think my back may even have been turned towards Carlos and the police officer. But even if I'm wrong about that, I wasn't seeing anything. I was locked on my phone call.
At some point, you see him being arrested, and you realize that he is being arrested, and it's the guy with the cameras, and he's being arrested.
That's right.
What do you do?
Having, as I say, been preoccupied with my phone call, my immediate fear was, have I crossed a police line into some area where I'm not supposed to be? Am I going to be arrested? I kind of threw my hands up in a supplicating gesture towards the female police officer and said, am I
Objection,
okay?
hearsay.
Overruled.
Go ahead, you can answer.
I said, am I okay? Am I wrong here? And she said, no, no. you're
Objection,
okay."
hearsay.
All right, sustained.
Did you specifically have a conversation with her?
I did.
So, and she knew who you were?
No.
Okay. Did you identify yourself later?
It's possible that after his arrest, I mentioned I was from the Miami Herald. We walked, after Carlos's arrest, I walked back to where my car, or I walked back towards the Metro Rail station to return to the Herald office. And we walked side by side. I may have mentioned during that I was a Miami Herald reporter.
Do you have any idea why you were arrested?
Objection, speculation.
Only if you know.
What was your question?
Do you know why you weren't arrested?
No.
Now, have you ever dealt with a police officer who's trying to block your First Amendment right to report the news?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
I think you already answered this, but in your mind,
Objection, leading.
Overruled.
ask the question.
Go ahead.
Was there any doubt in your mind that Mr. Miller was a journalist?
I wouldn't say I was 100% certain, but that was my assumption. Yeah, that's what it looked like to me.
Okay. After Mr. Miller's arrest, describe the scene for us. By the time I kind of got focused on what was going on, police officers were placing him in a car, in a police car. He said something like, careful of my cameras, or he said something protective about his equipment. Most of the demonstrators seem to have dispersed and disappeared. I don't recall any of them being in my immediate line of sight. There were a lot of police officers out there at that time. And there was the female police officer. She was sort of immediately to my right. Is that the person you later identify as Nancy Perez?
Yes, I believe so, yes. Yes.
Let me ask you another question. Did you get paid for coming here today?
No,
Are you a personal friend of Carlos Miller?
no.
Okay. How long were you waiting for outside?
6 hours.
Okay. And were you anxious to get home and be done with this?
I am.
Okay. And you're here today because of what? Is that-
I was subpoenaed.
Okay, thank you.
Would the state like to inquire?
Yes, Judge. Mr. Garvin, you just testified that you heard police officers on a loudspeaker, correct?
Yes, this was much earlier in the evening. This was at the commencement. Well, okay. What I testified about was at the commencement of the police move to disperse the demonstrators. But as I'm thinking about it, once or twice throughout the course of the evening, I did hear police officers on billboards. Subsequent to that.
And you also said that it was hard to tell who was a journalist or who was a protester, correct?
Yes,
Did you notice any other protesters with camera equipment?
yes.
Do you know, is it proper for a journalist to make himself the actual object of his story?
I don't know that there is a written set of rules about this. I would think most journalists wouldn't want to do that. The classic thing you say about the journalist is he's the fly on the wall, observing but staying out of the way.
So would a journalist scream at police officers?
I wouldn't say it's the best practice. It's been known to happen.
Would a journalist demand to be allowed to stand in an area they were pushed out of?
That would depend very much on the area, I think,
Would
and the
that be,
circumstances.
would that be more like making yourself the story or more being a neutral fly on the wall?
You're going to object to the generalizations about what journalists normally do. I think it was objected to during my correct.
I think you're right. We can move on.
Is journalism a license for arrogance?
Same objection.
That's sustained.
One second. No questions, thank you very much.
Would the defense have anything more?
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your time and have a safe journey.
Thanks very much.